And now back to one of our top stories where the U.S., Japan, and South Korea are set to announce a security pledge to consult one another in moments of so-called crisis as Washington seeks to counter China's growing influence. And joining us to speak more on that is Mr. John Ross out of London, Senior Fellow at the Chongyang Institute at Renmin University of China. Hello, Mr. Ross, pleasure to check in with you. Your thoughts when we see Washington basically forging some kind of a trilateral stance with Seoul and Tokyo to basically promote them or instigate them, one could even say provoke them to stand more defiant in the face of Beijing, and what ramifications that will have for geopolitics in that region?
Well, this is just an attempt by the United States to transmit the type of disastrous bloc politics it's had in Europe into Asia, and it's hopefully won't going to have the same disastrous consequences because most countries in Asia won't go along with it. But I mean, let's take a comparison of the situation. The situation in Asia is one of the biggest triumphs for peaceful development in the whole world. I mean, if we go back to just after World War II, the Southeast Asia and East Asia was the scenes of the biggest wars during the entire Cold War, the Korean War and the Vietnam War. Well, fortunately, in the last 40 years, we haven't had a major war. They've established peace, and they've got the most rapid economic development in the entire world. So this is a fantastic way forward. And the basis of that is that they don't have blocks, they want to get on with economic development, etc. Contrast that to Europe. Europe, we've got economic stagnation, and the biggest war in Europe since World War II. This is basically due to the expansion of NATO into Europe. So now the United States wants to export the same type of disastrous policies that it's had in Europe into Asia. It seems to have got Japan, and at least the present South Korean president, because I'm not sure that other South Korean presidents, either in the past or the future, would have gone along with this. But anyway, they've got the present South Korean president to sign up to this disastrous policy, and we'll just have to hope that the other, well, not have to hope, we have to work, that the other Asian countries refuse to go along with this disastrous US policy.
And it's really very ironic that you should mention the Korean War and Vietnam, because I have it right here as my second question to you, was that the last time we saw the U.S. push this kind of hegemony in the region, we saw the carpet bombing of North Korea and Vietnam and napalm all over Vietnam, basically two wars that were both unpopular with the people in Asia and American taxpayers in the States. So my question to you, it seems like, again, we are incrementally moving closer to conflict these days, and you pretty much touched upon it, but if you could elaborate just a bit more on how we are approaching conflict in the region of West Asia with the U.S. support.
Well, what the United States is attempting to do is it's attempting to impose a model whereby it has one political system, because it happens not to like China's political system, and whereby it has military blocs. Okay, this is the same formula that it's got in Europe, where everybody's got to be a presidential or parliamentary type democracy on the Western model, and we don't have any political diversity, and we have a military bloc, and we know what the result has been. It's been a massive war in the Ukraine. Asia's been totally sensible. I mean, you've got every conceivable type of political regime in East Asia. You've got socialist countries in China and Vietnam. You've got a monarchy in Thailand. You've got all sorts of different types of republics. So the Asian model has been not at all to attempt to pursue political uniformity, just that countries will determine their own internal development, and to avoid military blocs. And that's been highly successful, and the European model of NATO has been disastrously unsuccessful. But the United States wants to impose this onto the situation. Its problem is that many countries have got memories of the Vietnam War and the Korean War, and they certainly don't want a repeat of that. It's a gigantic achievement that East Asia has been turned from the zone of the biggest wars after World War II into a zone of peace, and they don't want it overturned by the United States. So the US has got two countries to go along with it. But I notice other countries are not so keen on this type of development at all. I noticed, for example, the United States invited the Philippines, along with Australia and, if my memory is correct, Japan, to go on some military exercises referred to as freedom of navigation, but actually military exercises in the South China Sea. And Philippines just said no. And I think that will be the response of most of these Asian countries. But unfortunately, this won't stop the United States trying to create trouble in the area.
Mr. John Ross, always a pleasure to check in with you, sir. Stay safe, and thank you. Senior fellow there joining us, Mr. John Ross out of London.